And last but certainly not least, we've got number 15, which I included because I wanted to have a brief review of yesterday's lesson. So I'm just going to be transparent and tell you this one is going to be a hypotenuse leg. Okay, I've got that word. Altitude. Should be altitude. So let's start by annotating the diagram. AB is congruent to BC, so this side is congruent to this side. They give it to me. Great. Okay, and then they say BD, right? BD is an altitude. Well, by definition, an altitude makes right angles. And this is all they tell me, okay? So, yeah, I could say these angles are congruent, but then I don't have the right information because BD is in this left triangle and this right triangle. So BD is going to be congruent to itself, and it looks like if I say these angles are congruent, I have angle, angle, side, side, and side, side, and that's the as postulate. And you can't use that, right? You can't use that to prove triangles are congruent. But we don't have to use that postulate. We don't have to say those right angles are congruent. And these aren't just any sides. They are particular ones, special ones. These are right angles, therefore these are right triangles, okay? This is a pair of congruent hypotenusae, okay? And that reflexive one, BD, is a pair of congruent legs, all right? Oops, I meant to say I want to use this one. So this is a hypotenuse leg problem. And the hypotenuse leg postulate says two right triangles are congruent if their corresponding hypotenusae and legs are congruent. So to start this, I need to establish first that I've got two right triangles. So that's how I'll begin. I'm not going to start with this, because if I start with that statement, that this is congruent to this, at that point, since it's my first one, I don't know their hypotenusae. So I'm going to start with BD is in altitude, and I'll copy down exactly what they say, except that tube part, to base AC. And 1. How did I know that? Oh, that was given. Okay, well, my next conclusion was that angle ADB and angle CDB are right angles. Well, how did I know that? Oh, well, that's the definition of an altitude. Okay, right, altitudes by definition form right angles. And then the next thing I want to say is, well, the triangles you're asking me to prove, triangle ABD and triangle CBD, they are right triangles. Well, how do I know that? Well, that's the definition. Definition of a right triangle. Okay. Now I can introduce my hypotenuse and leg. So I'll introduce that given. All right. 4. Side AB is congruent to side CB. All right. There's my hypotenuse. How did I know that? Oh, that was given. The next step is 5. BD is congruent to itself, and that's my leg, right? The side adjacent to the right angle. Hypotenuse is opposite the right angle. Well, how did I know that? Well, that's the reflexive property, okay? And then last and certainly not least is, well, prove it, all right? Triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. And how do I know that? Well, the hypotenuse leg postulate told me that. It says right triangles are congruent if their hypotenusae, corresponding hypotenusae are congruent, and their legs are congruent, which is exactly the flow of this proof.